Super Mario is easily the most recognisable name in gaming history. With his distinctive apparel and massively recognisable theme tune, you would have to have spent your life under a rock not to know who he is. He has starred in over 200 video games since his debut in the arcades, and to date the Mario franchise itself has shifted over 200 million units, making it the most successful video game series of all time. There are numerous things I can talk about relating to this famous portly plumber, but trying to cram in all that information in one sitting would probably induce a nasty brain hemorrhage. So instead, I'll just focus on what I believe to be Mario's finest hour, and that very moment in time takes place at the height of the 8-bit era. The late 80s and early 90s was when the NES itself was at the height of its popularity and was the definitive 8-bit gaming system to own. Especially this was the case when the new instalment of the Super Mario Bros. Series hit the scene. The game was originally released in 1988 in Japan, then in 1990 and 91 for the American and European markets respectively. It quickly became a huge success in the sales department, and for this reason the title was also later released on the Super Nintendo as a part of the Super Mario All-Stars compilation, and then on the Game Boy Advance as a portable version. Ever since its launch, it has received numerous accolades from both the critics and the public as it took the platforming genre to new heights. Notably, the game appeared as a sneak preview in the critically panned film The Wizard, which essentially in a nutshell was a feature-length advertisement for Nintendo peripherals. Many people to this day cite the only reason why people sat through that horrible film was to see Super Mario Bros. 3 in action, and that just shows how much hype the game generated before its actual release. Just think about it as a concept. People were willing to sit through 1.5 hours of cheesy acting and woeful plot just to see what the next Mario title entailed. That is simply astounding. It really did give a whole new meaning to the popular phrase Nintendo Power. I really could spin the nostalgic yarn for days, but now it's time to look at the elements that make this platform a true video game legend. Let's begin, shall we? The Mario series has never been exactly renowned for its sophisticated prose, and Super Mario Bros. 3 is no exception to that rule. It's for the best though, as adding a narrative to a platforming game is like adding a can of Budweiser to a glass of orange juice, i.e. it makes everything much worse. How do I know this? Well, I point to a certain title called Mario Sunshine, which encompasses a narrative involving an idiotic police force and a magic paintbrush. And no, I'm not making this up either. The plot in that game was so cheap, I very nearly threw my GameCube out the window in disgust. But don't get me started on that. Gameplay is where this game truly excels, and chances are you don't need a rocket scientist to explain why. In a nutshell, Nintendo took the tight formula of the first game and amplified it in every way. Yes, at its core it's still the same Mario game we all know and love. You rack up points, collect coins, obtain 1-up mushrooms and so on, but it's the extra new elements that Nintendo threw into the mix to make it really stand out from its predecessors. Keeping in with tradition, you still navigate your way through levels contained within separate worlds. However, instead of going through each level in a linear A to B fashion, there is now more flexibility in how the player can tackle the game's obstacles. This is thanks to the newly added map screen system, with which the player can now choose to a degree which levels to play through, meaning some can be skipped if they proved a bit too difficult. While at the screen, the player can also partake in mini-games to accumulate extra lives and enter mushroom houses to gain special items. Amongst favourites like the Power Mushroom and the Fire Flower, you can also obtain a bunch of new ones, including the Power Leaf, which turns you into a flying raccoon, a Hammer Brothers suit which allows you to throw, well, hammers, and a bear costume which allows you to turn into a damage-repelling statue. Yeah, you can probably see why many people still joke that Nintendo were possibly up to their shoulders in marijuana while making this game. Just look how crazy it is. On top of the newly added craziness, this title also has a bigger emphasis on secrets than previous efforts in the series. Each hidden cache you come across has its own particular reward. One, for instance, may bestow upon you a rare item, while another may provide a shortcut to the end of the level. While they are not necessary to complete the game, it certainly wouldn't hurt your progress finding one every now and then. This game boasts some of the best visuals that the NES system ever delivered, with crisp and brilliantly realised character sprites and bold colours scrolling across the screen. Now there are a few hiccups present in this department, as enemies and objects occasionally flicker, particularly moving at high speeds, and the background at odd moments throw up some strange colorisation issues. In all fairness, I'm nitpicking for nitpicking's sake, and problems like this appeared in other NES games at the time. Issues like this occurred when the console sometimes had difficulty processing the game's logic, be it the enemy movement scripts, background rendering, control recognition and so on. Thankfully, Nintendo actually knew how to utilise their hardware, and for this reason the gaffes are kept to a strict minimum. Gameplay performance takes priority over the visual flair, and that is always the correct compromise to take. Just like the visuals, the audio reflects some of the best compositions ever portrayed by the system. These musical elements have become the staple for the franchise and are known to be reused many times in later titles. Each world has its own musical ditty to reflect the theme, and numerous sound effects elegantly complement the score. Unfortunately, the music in the background does spike at times. Again, this is linked to the NES's processing limitations. It's nothing major per se, but for people who simply take glee in listening to the audio, they'll be slightly annoyed when their favourite tune drops a few bars when things get a little hectic on screen. Retrospectively, Super Mario Bros. 3 still remains hugely compelling to play to this day. It's a testament to the skillful programmers at Nintendo who have made it a landmark in video game history. Some of its sheen is worn away due to its age, and the lack of a save system does stick out like a sore thumb, but overall the foundations are solid and everything is in good working order. With NES games and systems becoming collector's items in recent years, for most people the best way to obtain the game is to download the VC version on the Wii. Being an emulated copy, it's the closest you can get to the original code, and being sold at the very low price of 500 Wii points, it's an absolute bargain. The Game Boy Advance variant, on the other hand, is essentially a port of the brilliant Super Nintendo version rather than an emulation of the original. Everything here is perfectly recreated on the GBA, apart from the soundtrack. As it had to be compressed to fit on a small capacity cartridge, some of the tunes sound a tad warped, which is a shame, because the audio is what made the game so great in the first place. If you thought this game looked and sounded good on the 8-bit Nintendo, just take a gander at the 16-bit version. This remake essentially is an overhaul with a much wider colour palette and a much more vivid musical score. Plus, as a bonus, the issues that plagued the original are gone thanks to the numerous bug fixes and the ability to save your progress. Now, copies of the All-Stars cartridge are not exactly what I call rare, but they're not common either, so wouldn't hesitate for too long if you plan to grab a copy. As not only do you get Super Mario Bros. 3, you also get Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, and the Lost Levels, all with updated graphics and sound. And even in later copies of the cartridge, Super Mario World comes on top of that as a bonus. You really will not find any disappointments here, so go play what is one of the best games in existence. Thank you very much for watching my video. Please tune in next time for more.